you want to talk about a religion? Emotionalism is the religion.
What's up, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls around the world? I would like to welcome you back to the Real Talk with Zuby podcast. Today, I am back in the hot seat in Las Vegas. We have got on a returning guest. I'm really looking forward to today's conversation. He is the OG of what is now known as the Red Pill. This is Mr. Rational Male himself, Rollo Tomassi.
Hey.
Welcome back to the
podcast. Good to be back. I think I was one of your first guests. Like when you first started the podcast, I think when was it? Like 2018?
It was.
When did you start?
4 years ago.
Yeah. So 2019?
Yeah.
Somewhere around there.
Yeah, I think late 2019 or early 2020.
Off the ground. Yeah. And then the last time I did a show with you was on Fresh and Fit.
Yes.
In August
was also a while ago.
2021. Yeah.
Yeah, that was also a while ago. Yeah. So first things first, man. How you been doing? How are you?
I've been doing real good. I have been very, very busy. Oh, gosh, I'm trying to think in the last 4 years, what have I been doing? In the last 4 years, I've produced 2 more books. So I have my 4th and my 5th book out right now. I'm obviously the author of The Rational Male. So I've been I'm more or less, I had the guy that your tech here was asking me like, what do you do? And I'm like, God, that's a really tough question. I'm a podcast host. I'm also the co-host of a new show that I put together with my partner, my business partner, Mike Sartain, here in Las Vegas. And I've recently sort of relocated semi-permanently to the Las Vegas area so I can be closer to what I need to be doing down here, which is taking up a lot of my time. So I spread myself pretty thin these days. So I'm working on books. I'm working on podcast shows. I'll go on interviews, and I was just on Tim Pool not too long ago. About a year and a half ago, I was on Dr. Phil. So I'll get pulled. I got a lot of irons in the fire, and I get pulled this way and that. And so I think it's more like I play whack-a-mole quite a bit, and I'm very good at it now. So
in today's fast-paced world, it's getting harder to live a healthy lifestyle. So many people are struggling with gut issues, stress, inflammation, fatigue, and immune health issues. With hectic schedules, processed foods, and the rising cost of healthy options, getting nutrient-rich food consistently isn't always easy. That's why I use Optimal Human. With over 90 powerful ingredients, 1 serving of Optimal Human helps me fulfill my daily nutritional needs. It contains powerful superfoods like organic reishi mushroom for brain health, turmeric root for joint health, CoQ10 for cellular health, and probiotics for gut health. It's simple to use and tastes delicious. Just add 1 scoop to water, a smoothie, or your protein shake and get an instant nutritional boost. Try Optimal Human today and get 50% off your first month by going to optimalhuman.com/Zuby and use the discount code Zuby at checkout. That's optimalhuman.com/Zuby and use the code Zuby at checkout. That's ZUBY for 50% off your first month. Take control of your health and reach your peak with Optimal Human. Try it out today. The concept of the red pill seems to have gone somewhat more mainstream, and I would say in a rather distorted fashion. So when I'm online, particularly on X, the app formerly known as Twitter.
Twix.
And even Twix.
Twix, that's what we call it.
Yeah, but on YouTube, on Instagram, even in some everyday conversations, I hear this term of red pill more. And I've even had people on podcasts be like, all right, Zuby, what is the red pill? Can you explain this to me? And you really, we've got to give credit to you as the person who coined the term as it is used as it pertains to gender dynamics. Obviously, it's a Matrix reference, which goes back 20 plus years ago. But for those who are listening, whether they've heard of it or they haven't, or they have misconceptions or they think they know what it is, what is the red pill?
To me, what the red pill is intersexual dynamics, which is exactly what you were saying before. I'll tell you a quick story.
Please do.
I was March of 2021, and I had just started getting involved with Fresh and Fit. And I think we were into our 3rd show, and I was interviewed. I still have this clip today. I use this as an intro sometimes on my own show. But there's a clip where they asked me exactly the same question. They said, do you think that the red pill is going to go mainstream? And my answer to both of the guys was, I hope not. And there's a reason I said that, is because what happens is when it goes mainstream, people will take the red pill as a kind of a loose brand or a term. And if it seems like it's something cool that the kids are doing, then they'll call it red pill, right? Now that we're in an election cycle, really started kind of like about like June of last year, really. But an election cycle is really 18 months now. It's not just a year. So Right around June of the year prior to an election cycle, that's when you see everyone pivoting towards like social issues and political issues. And what happens during those times is as people, especially traditional conservatives, want to pick up whatever is hot and whatever is trending at that time. And we saw the same thing happen back in 2015, 2016. So, for instance, if you go back to Twitter, Twix, whatever, around that time, and you look up Candace Owens' Twitter account, she used to call herself Red Pill Black. So what's red pill, right? Back then, people want to say, well, it's the alt-right. Or, well, it's a political thing. It's just seeing the truth for what it really is. And what happens is when it becomes ambiguous like that, and it's not like clearly, distinctly defined as intersexual dynamics, people take the red pill to be whatever their pet ideology happens to be. So if it's conservatism, that's the red pill. If it's I'm anti-feminism, that's the red pill. If it's vote for Trump, that's the red pill. MAGA, that's the red pill. Alt-right, that's the red pill. It's not the red pill. The red pill to me anyways has been and always will be about intersexual dynamics. So when I got into having these conversations with guys, I've been doing this, but people really know this. I've been doing this for like 22 years now. Yep. And I went back, people have asked me this before, I went back to look for my first instance of me using the term red pill on my old forums, like back in 2004. So for the red pill, or what we call the manosphere right now, there was no manosphere back then. But 2004, December of 2004 was the first time I ever found a post of me using that on the old SoSuave.net forums, which, by the way, is still around today. They're still active today. So there was the forum years, and then there was the blog years, and then there's sort of like the social media years sort of gets threaded into that. And then now we're at the YouTube years, right? Or the video production years. And so I've seen the red pill go from just guys getting together in forums and comparing notes to being guys like having religious, battles with each other and saying, Jesus says the red pill is incompatible with, Orthodox Eastern religion or Catholicism or Mormons or whatever it is. I'm like, dude, that's not the red pill, man. Yeah. The red pill to me anyways it's the praxeology of intersexual dynamics. And people think that when I say that, people think that that's some sort of cop-out. Because when myself or someone like Mike Sartain or Ryan Stone or some of these other guys that I've been working with for almost, some of them over a decade now, when we are talking about the red pill, we are just talking about factual absolutism. I mean, we're just saying what is true and what is not true. How you use that truth, and it's really sort of a pursuit of truth is what it is. Praxeology outside of sort of the economics definition, there's two definitions. There's the economics definition, and then there's the classical Greek definition, which is a praxeology is the study of human behavior, in that human behavior has purpose, has intent, there's a reason why we do those things. It's not about good. It's not about evil. It's not about what's right, what's wrong. It's not even about what's best practices. It's just getting to the point, finding out why we do what we do. And in the red pill sense, that's about intersexual dynamics. It's about male nature, female nature, evolutionary psychology, sociology, neurology, endocrinology. How many ologies do we have, And so it's a very, very broad spectrum, because when you think about how many ways intersexual dynamics crosses into all these like subfields, when people ask me, they say, well, what's the red pill? Give me the elevator pitch for the red pill. There is no elevator pitch for the red pill, because it's like a college major. Yes. It's not a bumper sticker. It's not something you just slap on the back of your car and say, I'm red pill, right? So when I'm talking about red pill, I'm talking about like empirical, factual absolutism about the things that are, not the things that should be. The problem is right now, there's too many people who want to jump into this space and say, this is what should be. So I don't talk about best practices. I talk about what is. Yes. So when people say, well, the red pill is this or the red pill is that, it's like, no, you haven't been in this field long enough to understand what a praxeology is, or I find most people who talk about it and who criticize it now, it's very clear they first came across the term sometime in the last 2 years. Yeah. Well, people think that the red pill begins and ends with Andrew Tate and Pearl Davis. That's what they think. And when I listen to personalities like Destiny say, oh, the red pill's dead, it's over now. I'm like, no, dude, it's been going on for, at least in my case, for the last 22, 23 years. Yeah. You simply don't have the depth of knowledge of how we even got to this point in the first place. Because if it makes if it gets click-through rate, if it gets eyes on the screen, if it gets audience retention, if it gets impressions on YouTube, then that's the new hot topic and everybody wants to be a part of it. The good news is that these things come in cycles. So during 2015, 2016, that election cycle, red pill was whatever people wanted to make it. In 2019, 2020, everybody wanted to pivot out of red pill and wanted to get into social issues and MAGA this and alt-right that. And now we see exactly the same thing happen. So that's when I was talking to Myron and Fresh in March of 2021. That's why I said, I hope not. Because what happens is individuals come into this space and they got no business being in the space. Yeah. And suddenly they become authorities on the red pill and they don't even know what they're talking about because they have no background in it. And for the red pill to remain about the facts, about empirical, reality, about the data, about the stats, about the praxeology of the red pill, it kind of has to stay underground. Yeah. It has to, or underground, maybe that's not their term, but it has to be in some way like non-mainstream. Right?
Yeah, well, it gets corrupted otherwise. I mean, one question I was wondering from your perspective, firstly, how much do you care about sort of owning that term? Is that something, do you get annoyed when you see the term being misused or just sort of being used as a pejorative or just being thrown in this way?
It gets into gatekeeping. It gets into a lot of gatekeeping stuff. And some people, we've had discussions about this before in some of the groups I'm in. Should we be gatekeeping? Should we not be gatekeeping? I've always been of the opinion that the red pill is open source. Okay. So I'm not the first word and I'm not the last word. I'm a very loud voice. I've been consistent in the red pill, like I said, for 20 some odd years. So I'd like to think I have at least some sort of authority in this. I have some sort of recognition and some sort of definitely some notoriety in this. But I'm not the last voice. I'm not the first voice. I'm not the last voice. And by the way, Andrew Tate and Pearl Davis are most definitely not going to be the first or the last either. Well, so same with Myron and Fresh, right?
It's interesting with Tate because Tate, as far as I know, doesn't even call himself.
Not anymore, but
did he?
What's interesting? Oh yeah.
Okay, fair enough.
I did some of the earliest interviews with Tate. People don't understand my background and my history with Tate. When people say, "Oh, Rollo threw Tate under the bus" or whatever, I'm kind of Tate agnostic right now. But I did some of the earliest interviews with Tate on my own channel back in 2017 and 2018. Okay. And so I've known him. I've known Tristan for probably longer than anybody who wants to tell you they went to high school together with him, which they didn't, right? So back in the day, he definitely wanted to be red pill. He was part of our red pill. Well, what was the manosphere back then? He was definitely part of that group. And then Tate morphed into the Tate that we know from 2020 on, and so he became. He sort of metamorphized into something that we think of as Andrew Tate right now. But back then, he definitely was. He called himself Red Pill even on my show. So, but now, of course, what happens is once we get into an election cycle and everybody wants to pivot away, now everybody's Red Pill adjacent, right? And to me, that's fence riding. Quite honestly, I'm Rollo Tomassi. I am the Red Pill. Yeah. Like there's no adjacent for me. There's no I'm going to pivot out into I don't know, make a fishing channel or something. That's not going to work for me. So, I am what I am.
But do you think the term can be reclaimed? Because when I now hear it being used by kind of everyday people, what they mean is not what it's really supposed to mean. No. All right. So I've been aware of the terminology as you're referring to it for at least 15 years.
And when you and I first did the first interview together, I was a Red Pill guy and you wanted to have me on the show.
I read The Rational Male around the time it came out. And prior to that, I was aware of, I don't know, there was all the whole mystery method time and Neil Strauss.
So that was a forum era.
Yes,
and that's the pickup artist era.
So there was all that. And so I've got a longer term view of, okay, this is what it is. And then now when people talk about red pill or red pill men this or red pill guys that, it's usually it's a straw man typically being used normally by conservatives, but also sometimes by people on the left to kind of just attack, I don't know, people they want to call incels or some type of misogyny and these guys who hate women and they're anti-marriage and they're this. It's like a straw man attack. So in the same way that lots of people on the left they have this idea of, a racist or a white supremacist, and they just kind of throw everything they don't like into that bucket. And I'm now seeing a lot of traditional conservatives even just kind of, there's this basket of icky ideas and people I don't like, and we're just going to call them red pill men, and I'm just going to kind of completely straw man what that means and attack it in that way. So it's at that point where I wonder if the term can be reclaimed. It's a bit like, I've had this conversation with some what I would call decent and reasonable feminists who are very keen on keeping hold of the term feminism and feminist, because they're just like, no, I really mean this as in equality and fairness, and I'm not anti-men, and I'm not, part of some female supremacist movement and so on. And I tend to tell them, I'm like, look, I just think the term has lost its, I don't think it can be reclaimed. I think it's been so corrupted.
The term feminist is, people like identifying as a feminist in the 21st century is virtually meaningless today because, and I've said this I've said this to conservatives, I said this to liberals, I said, if you were born after 1965, you're a feminist. You have had some form of feminism that has influenced your thinking, whether it was in college, whether it was in school, whether it was from like you're watching these Saturday morning cartoons. In some way, shape, or form, you have had feminist ideology just like drip fed into your influences and the things that sort of like, whether it's pop culture, whether it's music, whatever it's just in the air. It's just there. It's in the Western air. So when people go, well, only 12% of women identify as feminists, I'm like, this is a 21st century, bro. Like, just like, can we like have a modern conversation? I think you're right, though, as far as the red pill is concerned. And one thing that really kind of rubs me the wrong way is a lot of people want to conflate the red pill as being sort of like the flip side of feminism. And I think that's one of the biggest straw men that sort of mostly conservatives, traditional conservatives, would like to conflate it as. I'll get back to that in a second, but more to your point here is like, can we reclaim it? Can we bring it back to what it is? I think it's going to happen regardless because once it'll happen? It'll happen on November 6th. Okay. It's right the day after the election. All this stuff just goes poof because it's exactly what happened right after the 2020 election. We just got out of COVID and we just got out of all this other stuff. And the people were not thinking about politics anymore. They weren't talking about BLM. They weren't talking about Antifa. They weren't talking about that. So suddenly all that stuff just goes away after the election's gone. And now we have to find something else to talk about. And lo and behold, that's right about the time that Myron and Fresh started Fresh and Fit, right? Yes. January of 2021, right after the election. And so what happens is they got in at the right time. Like that's when the cycle was fresh at that point. But as far as sort of reclaiming the name, I think it won't be too difficult to do because so many people are abandoning it right now. So all the people who wanted to get on the red pill train and either be on these podcasts or be a quote unquote red pill influencer, now the best of them are red pill adjacent. The worst of them are just like, throw you under the bus and we never knew you, even though they've been making gravy money off of it for the last 2 or 3 years, just by wanting to be associated, standing in the same room with the red pill, right? So I think that, as I said before, when I was telling them I hope it doesn't go mainstream, once again, the reason why we even would need to reclaim the name or find some way to sort of re-identify to redefine it is because we have had so many bad actors come in here and just basically be the whipping boy there. Like for instance, I mean, one of the things I talk about when it comes to like say Pearl Davis is the worst thing that ever happened to the red pill. Simple as that. Because she goes on there and it's like her only purpose is to be ridiculous, is to represent the red pill and be ridiculous. So people can point to her and say, that's what the red pill is. Or Tate, that's what the red pill is. Or whoever, like name the worst culprits you can, whoever the straw men are that are there to characterize the red pill or to represent the red pill. And it's easy to attack those people. That's what ends up becoming the universal sort of definition of what red pill is. And I've said this on several other podcasts, but if there is no boogeyman, nobody gets paid. So there has to be like it used to be. I'll tell you, it's funny. It's like back in 2019, the boogeyman was pickup artists. Okay, which was kind of it was laughable to me at the time because there haven't been pickup artists in like 20 years.
This is in maybe peak Rouge V kind of time.
Well, even Rouge, I wouldn't even say that. Like when people talk about like back then, when people were talking about like they were sort of making the straw man was PUAs, right?
Okay.
And so they would conjure this image of like, say, mystery in like, like a top hat and like a feather boa and black fingernail polish. And he's got this, digital, reader on his things and he's in elevator boots. And that's, we can laugh about it even today, right? Because it's ridiculous. But that's what people were saying. Oh, you don't want to be like that. You want to be a traditional man and have a wife and 4.5 kids. And, and that now, of course, now we're pointing at like guys like Dan Bilzerian or people who are like living the life with like, they're single with a lot of women versus the family man with one woman and a lot of kids, right? So now we're sort of pitting those two together. But as I said, I think probably once the election cycle is over, that conversation is not going to carry the same water that it does right now.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. So there are a lot of people out there, a lot of people, including people I know, people I'm close to, who have the idea that red pill is an ideology that's about misogyny, it's anti-women, it's anti-marriage, it's anti-family, it's anti-religion, and that is their genuine understanding of what it means. How do you think that happened?
As I said before, they need a boogeyman. They need a straw man that they can point and sputter at. It kind of depends on the accounts because I see a lot of personalities sort of come into the space, and it's easy pickings to jump into the manosphere and say those guys are ridiculous, but my religion says that this is the way to go. And it's like, well, then what is it? It's Eastern Orthodox. Are you Orthodox Catholic? Are you evangelical? Are you whatever it is? And so. But they can all agree to hate on the red pill.
Yes.
Like that's the whipping boy, right? So they can all unite. It doesn't matter what franchise of Christianity you are. We can all we all agree we hate those red pill guys. Yes, yeah. So, but again, as you were saying, it's a convenient straw man. So, but I don't fit those molds, and I'm not trying to like personalize this or anything like that. But like one of the reasons I don't get the call from guys like Chris Williamson, or I don't get the call from, some of these more like bigger name. I shouldn't say Tim Pool because Tim Pool had me on not too long ago. But the reason I don't get Matt Walsh, for example, or the reason I don't get Michael Knowles.
I think you guys would have such a good conversation.
I think so too. And I'll tell you what's interesting is like Matt Walsh just had on a good friend of mine, which is Jim Sexton. He's the divorce attorney. And by the way, you should have him on this show. I'll hook you up with Jim. But because Jim was he and I are very good friends, right? He reads my book. I've been, sort of back and forth with him for a long time. And he just got on with Matt and was just basically just spelling out like what I would have said about like divorce and marriage and everything else. But it sounds different coming from a guy who's been a divorce attorney for like 22 odd years instead of like just me. But it's still a red pill conversation that he's having. It's just he's being educated. And so when I talk about the red pill, as I said, it's a praxeology, and people don't like it when I call it that because they think it should be more. You can't tell people information. You can't give them facts these days without telling them how to feel about those facts. So if I break my own rules all the time, which is like you got to give people interpretation. It's one thing to have stats and data. It's another thing to give your interpretation of those stats and those data. And you also can't do it in isolation. So too many people just focus on, and the red pill, like a lot of the guys who, personalities in the red pill are guilty of this just as well. So when I present a data point, I try to do it in correlation to other data points, right? So you can't, instead of just looking at one little teeny tiny tree, you have to see the forest, right? So, but I'm like probably one of the few guys that'll do that because focusing on just that one tree, that's what gets you clicks. That's what gets you engagement. That's what gets you Elon bucks. That's what gets you. Impressions on YouTube, right? So there's the business of all this, being a personality, being an influencer, and then there's sort of like having a dedication to mission, which is what I've been trying to say for a long time. But when we start talking about like, I hear this all the time. But the red pill is an ideology. The red pill is a belief set. The red pill is a cult. The red pill is a religion. The red pill is a philosophy. The red pill is a movement. It is none of those things. In its purest form, the red pill is just praxeology. It is just information. And as I said before, if you just give people information and you don't tell them how to feel about it, they will hate you for it. Or else they will insert their own interpretation and tell you what you think about the information, the data that you just gave. It can be completely neutral. But they, just by the very fact of you tweeting it out or relating it on Substack, or well, I'm a writer, so I go to Substack, but or you put it on your podcast or something, people want to fill in the blanks that you left out just by giving them that data. So if you don't tell them how to feel about it, then they're either going to hate you for that, or they're going to think that, oh, he must agree with me because this data fits with my pre-existing biases. Or it goes against my religion, and this is data, and the only reason Rollo will be relating this is because he hates God, right? Or he hates this religion, or he hates something else. It's like, no, I'm giving you this data so that you can use this and educate yourself. And that's really all I've ever been about. I don't give prescriptions. I don't give advice, right? And I just had this happen this morning, as a matter of fact, on Twitter, where it's like, this is bad advice. I'm like, dude, why do you think this is advice? If you're going to Twitter for life advice, you have a bigger problem than me telling you this data.
Yeah, but the thing is, that's where we are. It's a sad indictment on our society that so many young men and women look to the internet and social media and podcasts and influencers for advice. But I think the reality is that they do. We're just in this new age, and I don't see that.
They presume that anything you say is advice. Well, just by virtue of you being an influencer.
Yeah. Well, I think that both,
which, by the way, I hate that name. I hate influencer title.
Yeah. But I think both on the communicator side and on the receiver side, it's extremely difficult for the human brain to separate is from ought.
Yes.
So if you just say a factual statement, that is interpreted by a lot of people as you are saying this is how it should be, or this is how you want it to be, or you're suggesting all of these other things. Like you could just say a data point, and people will interpret that in all of their different ways. They run it through their own personal black box.
It, yeah.
And I also think that a lot of people speaking, it's like there can be someone who says, okay, I'm just giving information. But I think it's actually quite hard to just do that, because we even do have a tendency. We all do have an idea of how the world should be and how things ought to be and what you should do with certain information.
I always acknowledge personal bias. Like when I'm whether it's in the introductions of my books, I try to make a point of this in my intros, is that I understand that there's no way you're ever going, and any human being is going to get around implicit bias. That's not going to happen, because we all have it, right? So you can be as neutral and as objective as humanly possible, but there's still you still have to factor in the element that the reason why you would be interested in this stuff in the first place is probably because you have some sort of implicit bias, right? But I don't think that means we shouldn't take a good stab at it. I don't think that means we shouldn't at least try to find some way to connect dots. And again, that's another thing from the intros of my books. I think that one of the reasons why I'm seeing a lot of sort of evolutionary psychologist apologists today, they're apologizing for the red pill because we ask the right questions, or maybe the wrong questions in this term. And so even if we get something wrong, we're still asking questions that other people aren't. That we're making correlations that other people either are unwilling or unable to do for whatever reason. Maybe they don't want to lose their tenure at their college. Maybe it's just something that's not going to sell them books. Maybe it's not going to get them more people to their dating site. Whatever it is, but the fact that human beings, we still have an emotional element to us, so we're always going to have implicit bias. But again, that doesn't mean we shouldn't make a good stab at it. So, and that's what I always try for. So when the title of my books is The Rational Male. So when I get pissed off at something, or I watch Myron Gaines he broke his coffee cup the other day, people go, "Oh, look how emotional he's getting," and I'm just like, "Well, yeah, he's a human being, man." Because this righteous anger that's coming out of Myron, right? And it's not that I don't expect guys to be like Mr. Spock, completely devoid of emotions. That's a human element. We still have to have emotions. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's when those emotions are what guide us in making life decisions, rather than using our rational, learned experience, our learning, our reason, that part of it. I break down sort of human interpretive processes into instinct, emotion, and reason. Okay. Instinct is the fastest. So for instance, if I were to throw something at you, you dodge out of the way, right? That's instinct, and it's immediate and it's fast. Emotion is a little bit slower than instinct, but it is we do this so that we can interpret our surroundings and process the stimuli that's sort of around us. And then there's reason, and reason is the slowest version of this. Hang on a second. Reason is the slowest version of that because it requires learning. And it requires you to have experienced something and taken something away from that past experience and then apply it to a new experience that is similar to that one. That's the slowest part of that. So when we're talking about reason, we're using like learning, our learned intelligence. When we're applying that, that's really tough to do when we have been taught, well, we've kind of been conditioned, I should say, really since right around the post-sexual revolution era, that we should be thinking with, or we should be making decisions with our heart and our, it's all about how you feel inside, right? And it's like, no, we need to start I think we really need to start making more decisions based on our rational, reasonable judgment. But that doesn't mean that I'm suggesting that we kill off our emotional side. It's impossible to do. It's like carving out a part of your brain. So the red pill's never been, at least my definition, has never been about being completely non-emotional. It's just that, are you leading with your emotions? Are you in your emotions? So it's feels before reals. I'm sure you've heard that before. It needs to be reals before feels, but that doesn't mean there is no feels, at the tail end of that. And we really need to sort of get back to, I think, whether it be religion or politics or social issues or whatever else, we need to start putting off the feeling side and actually start getting into the reason side, not to the exception of emotion, because emotion is always going to be there, but we need to start putting reals before feels. And I think we'd probably be in a better place as a society if we actually did that.
I agree. I think that across the entire West, we live in very gynocentric societies. And when I say that, I don't even explicitly mean as the split between the male and the female sex. I just think that society overall, its mentality, its way of doing things has been very heavily
in the
feminized. So the feels before the reals has become the general way that things are in the UK and Canada, in the USA and Australia, and certain parts of Western Europe. I mean, it's like there's no greater sin. It's like it's worse to say something honest that hurts someone's feelings than to lie.
Yeah.
I would say that is the wrong way around. I would say, no, it's better to tell the truth and risk hurting people's feelings than it is to lie, even if the lie makes people feel good.
Yeah.
I don't want to dwell too much on the issue, but I do think the most obvious version of this is the entire transgender issue, right? The whole concept is, nope, if that big, strong man with the beard says that he is a woman and you say, no,
you're not,
then, okay, you may be factually correct, but you are morally and emotionally and ethically wrong now. And we're going to prioritize the feelings over the reality. If that means girls are getting smashed in their sports, so be it. If that means women are losing beauty pageants to males, so be it. If that means men are being housed in female prisons and now female prisoners are magically getting pregnant, so be it. If it means that we're putting out a news report on a criminal who's on the loose, and we're going to put she pronouns, even though it's a guy, because we don't even want to risk the feelings of this person who's just murdered someone. That's how far this whole thing has gone. Yeah.
Well, we're pandering to a neurosis is what we're really doing. And when I talk about this, I usually go for, I forget the guy's name, the man's name, who was the #1 swimmer in female swimming, and he's like the number 436, male swimmer.
William
or something like that.
Leo Thomas.
And I remember when that came out, and I started commenting on that. You have to be really careful, because if you say even the word trans on YouTube, that triggers the algorithm, right? You can't even say trans. You can say MFer. I can't say it on here, but you can say that's okay on YouTube, but you can't say trans, right? Because there is such an investment in emotionalism, and that's where you want to talk about a religion. Emotionalism is the religion. Okay, so what I in my fourth book, which by the way I quoted you in.
Yeah, no, I read it.
You did read that one. Okay, in that book, I make a distinction between like if you want to tear down any sort of social issue, any sort of institution that's sort of the woke lefty progressivist side of the spectrum wants to sort of push out there, like whether it's trans athletes and whatever. All you have to do is kick out the four legs of the stool. Okay, the four legs of the stool are social constructionism, which is a lie and has been the nature versus nurture debate has been over for like since the mid 2000s, and people still haven't caught up to this. Okay, it's the laws of behavioral genetics. Okay, personality is inherited. Gender identity is inherited. It's heritable. It is a biological process. So one of the things that like the woke left like to bring up all the time is that there is a distinction between gender and sex, right? Oh, well, one's a social construct. Well, like, no, they're not, because gender identity is downstream from biology, from neurology. Okay, so the only reason you even have a concept of male and female to have an identity in the first place is because your brain architecture is either male or female. That's it, right? So when you take that lie away and say that, and you have you make no distinction between gender and sex, you take that away. Think about how many edifices of the woke left crumble when you take that away. Take away social constructionism. Crumbles. What crumbles as a result of that? The blank slate. We're all the same. No, we're not. We are most definitely not. Take that away. It's gone. Take away emotionalism. Feels before reals. Take that leg off of the stool. Everything starts to collapse. And then you take away egalitarianism. Take that out and into everything. Every single issue, every single belief, every single ideology that is a secular ideology. I call it a secular religion because that's basically what it is. You take away social constructionism, emotionalism, egalitarianism, and the blank slate, those four legs of the stool, and every single institution that they can talk about collapses. And all four of those are easily provable, easily destroyed. Yeah. And I think like traditional conservatives, instead of making louder emotional appeals and emotional arguments, stop it. Start making rational arguments. And because once you do that, they can't defend against those things and everything comes crashing down. I'll give you one last example here. Did you see this? When Matt Walsh went on Dr. Phil, and he went on there with the bearded lady. Yes. That's all I think I get. I don't know the name, so that's all I said. It's the bearded lady. And he had a friend with him, and then there was that lady professor, that feminist professor that was on a gender studies professor that happened to be on. And by the way, it's classic Dr. Phil to like set that. That's like perfect. But I watched that, and of course, this was when Matt was doing his "What Is a Woman" thing, and this was before the documentary had come out. And I didn't know that there's a documentary. And so I was like, yeah, Matt, go. And then I realized he had this documentary. He's just doing this for content. I'm like, but he had a really good, he was trying to make an argument based in, it was the first time I ever seen anybody try to make, especially from tradcons, try to make an argument based on empirical reality. Like here, like, are you a cat? You know, like his classic, you know, he runs through this sort of script every time he does. And I thought about this, and I did a full dedicated show when a reaction video to this when it came out. And I was watching this and I go, there's no way he's going to ever corner these people with logic. It's never going to happen, because here's what would be required is if he were to say, empirically, provably say, your identity is false. If he says, look, a man is a man and a woman is a woman, and here's why. The reason why the bearded lady couldn't give Matt Walsh a definitive, distinct, empirical, black or white, objective answer, what is a man and what is a woman, is because if she did, then what would be required is for that to go and re-examine their own identity and everything that sort of made their personality from the time they were like 3 years old up to, I don't know how old they are in their 30s, right? And that's sort of a microcosm of everything. Like when we're having conversations, whether it's with tradcons or with leftists, is if you challenge people's ego investments in things with empirical data, with empirical, objective, provable, here it is, black and white, I've got the data right here. You have two choices. You either accept that and you start re-examining your life, which nobody wants to do, or you go into denial. And that's exactly where you find like sort of this whole transgender issue thing is they go into denial. But it's basically an emotional argument against another emotional argument, rather than in between. There's factual absolutism that can destroy both of those. And if tradcons wanted to win this debate, they wouldn't be trying to make louder emotional appeals. They would be making rational appeals. But as I said, you can't give people data without telling them how to feel about it. So there's that emotional element that goes in there.
Rollo, something I've noticed, and I find this a little bit bizarre because I am a Westerner in many ways, but my family background is
Dubai, right?
My family's from Nigeria. I live in Dubai now. I grew up in Saudi Arabia. So I
thought you were in the UK for some reason.
I'm British.
You were?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm British.
You grew up in Britain?
Grew up primarily in Saudi, but went to boarding school in the UK from 11 and went to university there. So I kind of lived in Saudi for 20 years and lived in the UK lived in the UK for 20 years, even though I'm under 40. There was like a lot of overlap. But something I find really peculiar in the West, and I see this every day in different ways, and I see it both from liberals, conservatives, centrists, and so on, but I find an interesting just discomfort in the West about the idea that men and women are different. I find that whenever that topic and subject and those discussions come up, there's this strange discomfort where so many people, I think, have been sucked into the egalitarian idea, that the idea that men and women have like some really core fundamental differences beyond just the most obvious things. I just find that makes people deeply uncomfortable. And I don't really know why, because in most of the world, it's not like that. In most of the world, it's just understood and accepted that males and females are different. Therefore, we have gender roles. Therefore, we do certain things
division of labor
differently. And here it's just like people just
bristle.
Yeah, people bristle. Why is that? Why?
Because really, since the sexual revolution, we have had this press towards gender parity, right? Or this idea that men and women should. There's your ought and should be equal. And I will tell you right now, equality is a false god and has been so for quite some time. I really threw the audience on Dr. Phil for a loop when I said I don't believe in equality. And people were like, "Oh my God!" Was his wife Robin McGraw was like this the whole time? Exactly. It was like blasphemy because that's the religion. The religion is equality, right? We should all be more equal. We're all equal in the sight of the Lord. That kind of stuff. No, we're not. No, we aren't. There are people who are more respectable than other people. There are people who are homeless out here on the streets right now, and then there's people who are at the top of the win right now who are more respectable than those guys. It's just simply the reality that we live in. Are we all equal value, towards God and whatever? Okay, we can make that case. But we're living right here on planet Earth, and I will tell you right now, it is not. There's no such thing as equality, because what we've done is we've taken the idea of equality and we've turned it into, religion first of all, but second of all is we've turned equality into this sort of ambiguous, what you say when you don't know what to say kind of thing, and. So whenever I'm talking about equality, like people say, well, why don't you believe in equality? I say, well, what's the conditions? Because the equality you're talking about right now happens in a vacuum. The one I'm talking about, it happens right here on planet Earth, and there are definitely some advantages and disadvantages that people have. And so the idea, I think, of sort of gender equality or racial equality or economic equality or let's attach equality to any like prefix, right? It's not that I don't think that it's a great idea. It's just simply untenable. So when somebody says, "Well, what do you mean by there's no such thing as equality?" So, well, if I, as a human 56-year-old male, want to have a child right now and I want to bear it myself and give birth, I can't do that because it's physically impossible for me to do this. Oh, that's very, very unequal and unfair. I want to be more equal, right? Well, sorry, that's not going to happen for you. Okay, that's just one really stupid, over the top, exaggerated illustration of this, but it illustrates a point that there are certain conditions. What is the challenge of equality that you're saying, right? I'm not going to play power forward for the Knicks. I'm sorry, that's just not going to happen in my lifetime. Okay, that seems horribly unequal, right? When I listen to like Megan Rapinoe on the the female soccer team, women's soccer team, right? Like talking about how they wanted equality and they wanted to have to be paid the same. Well, you're not playing in the same game as the guys that are. As the men are, and of course, what happens is actually they're getting the female the team is getting paid more. They're getting overpaid by rate of comparison, because of the market that they're in. The market that women's soccer is in, they're actually being paid more, like respectively, than the men are in men's soccer. And it takes an economist and an actuary to figure that stuff out. But when you see it in black and white, let's move on to the scroll. Keep scrolling, But as far as equality is concerned, I would say, okay, do you believe in equality? Well, under what terms? Let's clarify this. Are we talking about women in sports? Are we talking equality in transgender athletes in same-sex sports? Is that the equality that we're talking about? Is it me giving birth? Is it because when you just throw out the word, well, everybody should be equal, you're getting into egalitarianism, and egalitarianism, as I said, is one of those isms, and it's an ideology. I make a distinction when you're talking about gynocentrism and you're talking about how things have become a little bit more feminine. I call it the feminine imperative in my books, but gynocentrism, because we have differing ideas when it comes to there are like terms and terminologies that are gendered terms. So like one of those is respect. And I have a point to this, but when one of those is respect, there's two. If you go and you look in the definition, the dictionary definition of the word respect, there's two definitions. One is the one we probably would think, well, what makes you respectable? It's merit-based. You have to have achieved something. You have to have done something for it, like you to respect a man. Okay, well, what have you done that makes you respectable? Why should I respect you, right? Are you, whatever your accomplishments happen to be, whatever your body of work happens to be, that's a merit-based hierarchical version of respect. That's the male version of respect. The second definition is everybody deserves respect. It's common courtesy.
Kind of like human dignity.
Exactly. And everybody, you should treat everyone with respect. Those for the same word, those two definitions are diametrically opposed to each other. But yet, when somebody says like, I think it was, they have a new minister of changing men's behavior in Australia right now. It was just made the news. Literally, there's a cabinet position for changing men's behavior. And I forget the guy's name.
I take it that's not equal enough.
As soon as I saw that, I found that guy's Twitter. I'm like, game on. So I went after this dude because he was saying, well, we need to start by respecting men. Need to start by respecting women. I said, well, what definition of respect are we talking about? Are we talking about the hierarchical or are we talking about
definition of woman?
Yes, exactly. Exactly. So and then I try and explain the difference and the reason why there's gendered concepts. There's other gendered concepts, but respect is the easiest one because it relates to egalitarianism. So when we complain and we talk about how that we have this participation trophy generation, and it's like everybody gets to feel good about themselves, and it doesn't matter if you win or lose. It just means we all got.
It's very female coded.
That's very female. Well, because when we evolved from hunter gatherer tribes, men were hierarchical. Because to be the chief, to be the best hunter, to be rewarded by women's attention and their sexual interest in you, you had to be better than the next guy. So guys are innately, naturally evolved to be more hierarchical. So when you see how men organize society, it's always hierarchical. There's like if you look at chain of command in the military, there's the general and there's a lieutenant and then there's a sergeant and all down the chain of command to the private, right? If you look at how we organize the workplace, there's the CEO, the CFO, the COO, all the way down until you get to the janitor, right? And for sports teams, there's a captain of the team, yada, yada. Men think in terms of hierarchy. Women think in terms of the round. They're communitarian. Men are more interested in things. Women are more interested in people. Well, the reason for that is because women are the vulnerable sex. They're the ones who have to gestate the next, generation of kids. Eggs are expensive. Sperm is cheap. Men protect women because women are the vulnerable sex, right? Well, there's strength in numbers too. So if you have women in this it takes a village to raise a child, right? You've heard that. So you have this community, this communitarian society. So when women organize society, it's almost socialist, or for lack of a better term, socialist, communitarian. When men organize society, it's the general, the lieutenant, all the way down to the private, right? So it's organized hierarchically. Right now, I think one of the things that when you're talking about why is it, why do we have such a problem with all this stuff? Yeah, what you're saying is because women have a different definition of like how we should organize society. Egalitarian, where respect means one for you and one for you and one for you. And oh, June, you're pregnant, so here's two for you. And then like it's very communist, right? It's like from each's strengths to each's needs. I'm probably butchering
from each according to his abilities
to each according to their needs, right? And by the way, that concept, that's a Marxist concept.
Yes.
That Marxist concept has filtered into our marriage. Right, into what we think of marriage, right? 50-50 marriages, everything. Never call your wife or your husband your partner, like in front of Ben Shapiro or Matt Walsh
or me,
or me. Yeah, I'll tell you, I don't know if you're familiar with Jed Abila, but I've been working with Jed for a while. One of the first interviews we ever had, she started referring to her husband as her partner. I go, stop. And she's like, what? I said, you just referred to Jeremy's his name. I said, you just referred to Jeremy as your partner. I said, that's your husband.
There's a gender neutralization going on even within the language. And I've noticed this even during my relatively short life. Like 20 plus years ago, if a guy said his partner, that was code that he was gay.
I just did that. I told you about my partner Mike.
Yeah,
and I go, my business partner Mike.
It always used to be the subtle but not so subtle way
of saying you're homosexual.
Same-sex person, someone who's attracted to the same sex, referencing their boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever. They'd say, my partner, and everyone would kind of subtly know, oh, okay. And then I noticed a shift in the last 15 years, particularly last 10, where I started noticing straight people starting to use that term, even if they're married.
By the way, homosexual people are mad at the heterosexual people for taking their word.
That's I'm not surprised. And so I'm like, that's strange. No one used to call, guys didn't used to call their wives their partner. Women didn't used to call their husbands their partner. Like there's a very specific word already that exists for that. So why are we going to the less specific, more nebulous term where that could mean anything from your boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, spouse, business partner, friend? Like it's all the same word.
Well, it's because in a female-centric, in a gynocentric social order, in a lot of the things that I think that people complain about today as being woke are really much more feminine than they are really woke. And by that I mean organizing a society for the female psyche is done in the round, okay? So if everybody is equal, then we should stop referring to each other as man and woman. We should start saying comrade, I guess. I don't know. But like we should start referring to, instead of husband and wife, we say partner.
Person. I've noticed I've noticed that one as well. My person. I'm just looking for my person. It's
supposed to be gender neutral, but I'll tell you the thing is like when it comes to the English language, you just take out any word that has the consecutive letters of MAN in it, and then like instead of fireman, it's fireperson, or mail carrier instead of mailman.
But they're doing it now that actresses, waitresses. Now, no, it's actor. They're all actors,
right? Yeah.
They're all waiters.
That is the masculine. You realize that, right?
On the plane, used to say
it's okay to be masculine if you're an actor.
Yeah, they don't say stewardess anymore.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, like flight attendant.
Yeah, so I've noticed like from the 90s till now, I'm like, why is everything being gender neutralized? Like, what is wrong with?
But because they want to remove the man. Because honestly, I think it originally started because there was this, smash the patriarchy. So what do you do? I believe it was in the book 1984, and I'm going to paraphrase this, but George Orwell said, if thought corrupts language, then language can corrupt thought. And so if people have asked me this before. They say like, well, what can we do, Rollo? How can we fight back? You can stop using their language. Yeah. Stop using, and I make very, very distinct differences between us and them. And I do this deliberately in some of my writing where I say, stop using their language and start using our language. Use the language of empiricism. They're using the language of emotionalism. Remember, we were talking about empiricism, or objective reality and truth versus emotionalism. There's a language of emotionalism, and there's a language for empiricism. So when somebody will not, what was the meme where the guy was at the liquor store and he was transgender? He goes, "It's ma'am." If you go, "No, it's sir," and if you insist on
Hate
using,
speech.
because what it is if thought can corrupt language and language can corrupt thought. So what it is it's a war of emotionalism versus rationalism. And so if you concede to use their language, that's dragging you that much more over. And you know what? If you keep doing that, your kids will start using those terms, and your kids will start using those terms until anything can become normal.
I'm so glad you're making this point. I was actually at a conservative Christian conference about 2 years ago. and so people were discussing. It was a very politically charged event, and people were, most of the people at the table were parents, and they were discussing some of the things going on in their children's schools and what they're learning, and they're railing on all of these things. And I noticed one of the women who was going hardest on it all, she was respecting preferred pronouns as she was ranting. And I put out my hand and I was like, you should stop doing that. Because number one, it's actually really hard to know what you're saying, because if you're talking about a man and you keep saying she, it's confusing to people because
birthing people versus
because I don't know if you're talking about a male or a female. Like it's really hard to track the conversation. But also if you concede that this man who's not even in the room, so you can't even say, oh, I'm trying to be polite. This person's not even here, and you keep referring to him as a she, then you're just undermining your own. You're undermining your own argument. You're accepting their premise that a man can be a woman, or that
at
sex and gender
tacitly.
You're tacitly accepting it, and now you're sort of standing on one foot, and it's very easy to push you now because they've already corrupted your own language and your own way of thinking. So just by making that concession, as well as some of these other ones, you are kind of ensuring you're still going to lose. You're kind of slightly slowing the loss, but you're still going to lose because you're unwilling to just say what it is.
That's why I keep saying, like, if you are if you want to do something about this, you have to stop using their language. And if that means like misgendering them, then that's what that means. Sorry, but you're going to have to misgender them.
That's so interesting. Because even the term misgender, I would say by calling a man a she, you are misgendering them.
Yeah,
because a man is a he.
Empirically, that is true.
Even the term misgender is coded.
Yes,
right. There's like a left-wing version of misgendering, which is not calling them by what they want to be called. Right. Whereas I would say misgendering actually means using biologically incorrect pronouns. Yeah. But people have again conceded that one to the idea that misgendering is calling.
Well, what they're doing is they're pandering to it, and I will tell you this is. If there is a war between the speaking the emotional language versus the empirical language, if you insist on speaking only the language of empiricism, by the way, the language of empiricism always sounds like hate to language. It does, because you're not following along with the program. You're not doing that's where shame comes in, or you're going to be on the wrong side of history. There's no heaven. There's only the wrong side of history. Yeah, just saying. But so the emotional side really, what will they do is, like, if you make I've done this several times on God knows how many different podcasts, but if you start making a really good empirical argument about something that people are very emotionally invested in, they have their egos invested in that emotional, and they got no counter argument. That's when they go, who hurt you?
Yep.
Well, what was your family life like? Now they turn into armchair psychologist, or have you ever been in love? You need to touch grass. all those. I know we laugh at it, but it's funny because what they're doing is they're trying to reframe that argument from an empirical argument into an emotional argument. And if you bite, you're done. Yep. That's it. You're dead. Yep. But the emotionalism versus empiricism. When you stick to your guns and you don't bite on, who hurt you, and you say, no, this is the truth. What do you like? I'm going to rope-a-dope, bring them back into the ring, right? Say, I want you to tell me what a woman is, right? I want you, because when you do that, you force them to have some insight about themselves and their own identity and that ego investment. That is a false ego investment. You are actually helping them by not pandering to them. It's tough love. And you might go to jail for misgendering somebody, but maybe that's the price you have to pay to say, look, this person is speaking crazy talk. Like, this is you want me to agree with you because it will feel better for you, but I know what the truth is here. I did it's like 3 years ago, I did an interview with Michaela Peterson.
Okay, yeah.
And
I think I saw that.
I think after she was interviewing with Chris Williamson right after that, and she says, I interviewed with Rollo and everything, and he made some good points. She says, but I didn't feel really good after that. And I'm like, I'm doing my job right, awesome, because I don't care. That's not the point. I'm not here to make you feel good at the end of the thing. I want to educate you. I want to wake people up.
Do you think
comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable?
Do you think that's why there are people out there who just run with the idea that you just hate women?
Oh, they always do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and that's because I'm the language of empiricism will always sound like hate to the language of emotionalism. So the people who want to say, oh, Rollo just hates women, or the red pill, those red pill guys, meaning me, but like those red pill guys, those red pill guys, they hate women. It's like, no, we don't hate, like the red pill, it doesn't exist so that men will hate women. It exists so that men won't hate women for what they can never be to those guys. It's a form of education. It's I look at it this way: the red pill is like fire. Okay, you can use that fire to heat your home, cook your food, do whatever do something beneficial to yourself, or you can use it to set yourself on fire and set your neighbor on fire and set the neighborhood on fire and set his house on fire as well. That's all an application, and that's where people really they think that because it can be used for manipulative, selfish purposes, that therefore it must be a net negative to society because it should be whatever I say it should be. No, it is what it is. It's all just like whether it's pro-social or anti-social is all in the application.
Yeah. I find that in our society, and again, I think this is because the overall culture has been so heavily feminized into this emotionalism. It's like there are ideas and knowledge and facts and data and statistics that exist that you're supposed to pretend that they don't. And if someone even dares talk about them again, it's drawn back into the emotionalism. It's drawn back into some type of hatred, or you are anti this, or you are anti that, because you're even just talking about the thing.
Well, it's part of the denial part. Like I said, when people are faced with like reality, like that really sort of shatters their ego investments, you have two choices. You can either go into denial, or you can accept it, analyze yourself, and then change yourself as a result of that. Most people don't want to change themselves. Yeah. So it's easier. The easier path is to go into denial. Denial can take all kinds of different forms, such as you hate women. Who hurt you? Go touch grass. Have you ever been in love? That kind of stuff.
I think what also happens, particularly online, is the truth is not everyone is sophisticated. You're a sophisticated guy, okay? So you can talk about these issues. Say it, but okay. Yeah, you're sophisticated, right? So you can practice a broad range of cognitive tasks and skills.
Multitasking.
Over the course of time, well, not even just multitasking, but I've learned, particularly through the internet, that not everyone is intellectually equipped for every form of thinking. There are some people who can't deal in hypotheticals.
Oh, yeah.
If it's not literal, they can't wrap their head around it. Like, I didn't used to think this was true, but I've come across it so many times.
You just put out just recently.
Yeah, there are people who they don't understand hypotheticals. There's people who don't understand abstraction and analogy. There are people who don't understand that something can be generally true whilst not applying to them.
Or two things can be true at the same time.
Or two things can be true at once. Or just because something's not at this extreme, it doesn't have to be at that other extreme. There's a lot of middle ground.
Was it? Sorry, go ahead. Was it you that said, like, if you put out a tweet that says, "I like pancakes"?
Yeah. No, mine was.
Why do you hate waffles?
Yeah, mine was actually mangoes. I think it was mangoes.
Yeah. I was like, why do you hate waffles? I didn't say anything about waffles.
I think my most liked tweet of all time. I think it got over 250,000 likes. It was like how Twitter works. Me, I like mangoes.
Yeah.
People, I can't believe, why you can't believe you hate strawberries. You forgot to mention kiwis.
Yes.
Go and educate yourself. Yes. You bigot.
Yeah.
You fruit phobic.
Yeah, just like a conservative to come down on mangoes. Exactly.
I was like, hey,
just to say anything. Well, I'd tell you what's funny is I can remember, I was discussing this with my wife. My wife actually came up with this one. She said that it sounds to me like if you like something on Twitter or on social media, if you really like something, you tweet, say, hey, I really like this thing, people will hate you for liking it. Oh, you're so stupid. You really like that stuff? Like, that'll be the response. But if you hate something on Twitter, people go, oh, one of us. Like, they love you for hating on something. And it's like the most crazy backwards thing. You would think it'd be the other way around.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm glad you enjoy that. That's awesome.
It's so interesting.
I too enjoy the same thing.
It's interesting you brought that point up, because the point I was actually going to make about the absence of sophistication is I think this is one of the reasons why ideas around something like the red pill can be easily misconstrued, because there are some young guys out there who do genuinely have some type of animosity towards women, or they just don't understand them. They've gone through something. And so they will hear certain statements or certain facts or data points or whatever it might be, and they take it and they run with it to validate all of their feelings. So they're still caught up in emotionalism, but now they're just in, some people might use the term red pill rage, right? They learn a certain
there is an anger phase for sure.
Yes, they learn something about intersexual dynamics, and they're mad because they're like, why can't I just be the nice guy who buys chocolate and flowers and da-da-da, and every woman should love me? Yeah, right? Like, why should, look at these guys. Yeah. How dare this guy have, like, these women, I should have that, and so they're angry at men, they're angry at women. They just think the whole thing is like that.
It's rigged.
Yeah, the whole game is rigged. And then, of course, you do have...
you're just a bad player.
Yes, and people are now, incel this, incel that, incel that. Like, yes, incel people do exist. It's not some gigantic
I would say fewer men identify as, self-identify as an incel than people who identify as trans.
Yeah, it's a tiny thing.
It is a minuscule fraction of 1%. It's a rounding error.
But again, it's become this boogeyman.
Yes.
And it's also become a pejorative to just throw at people you don't like.
I'm on a DHS watch list for that shit, right?
Wait, tell me more.
There is an NGO called Diverting Hate. They're out of Arizona State University, and they are funded by the McCain Institute, which is funded by the DHS, which is funded by your taxpayer dollars. The Diverting Hate has been essentially going to red pill content creators such as myself, Rich Cooper, Myron Fresh, Pearl's on the list too. Aaron Clary, of all people, who should not be on that list whatsoever. How you got on that, I don't know. But yeah, he's an actuary economist guy. But they have these ratings for like male supremacy ratings. I'm like, where did they get this from? Well, it's from this organization called Pearl, P-E-R-L, I think is what it is.
Funny.
Yeah, I know, it is quite funny. But they have some sort of like way of quantifying like your rating as a not as a misogynist, as a male supremacist.
Wow.
Right. And so what they've done is they've convinced the DHS through the McCain Institute that people such as myself need to have our traffic diverted from through YouTube and through Twitter to what are essentially state-approved positive masculinity guys like Justin Baldini and like guys from the Good Man Project.
I don't actually know who that is.
Justin Baldini is a guy he's kind of like this sort of man bun, masculinity guy, and he's got a YouTube channel called something like I don't even want to give him a plug, but I will now because he's sort of wrapped up in this. But it's like we are man enough, I think is what it's called. But doing ad buys on my channel and diverting my traffic and my subscriptions over to Justin because he would have had to have approved it at some point. But essentially what diverting hate is it's meant to, like, we're hateful, right? So they're diverting the traffic and diverting people to positive masculine influencers, right? And the reason why they're doing that is exactly because of the incel thing, the incel boogeyman, okay? Because there's they've somehow convinced the DHS that incels should be placed on a terrorism, like domestic terrorists, right? And the people who are radicalizing them are people such as myself, Rich Cooper, Aaron Clary, and MTR,
a couple years ago, they tried to hit Jordan Peterson with that.
Yeah, they did, but that was back when they were, I think it was in November of 2022, and they were coming up with the definitions and terms that watch terms, such as Chad and Stacy and all these stupid things. These incels. I'm like, really? That's me. That's where my tax dollars are going, is to put Chad and Stacy on some terrorist language watch list. But it gets more serious when I look at my traffic and my growth on my YouTube channel has basically flatlined since November because these people put them on there, and I'm actually looking into taking up legal action against them because it's a civil rights or a First Amendment right issue, right? You're bridging my right to actually make money by speaking what I want to speak, right? And so essentially what you're doing is you're diverting my traffic away and through using taxpayer dollars to do so. So I'm looking at what my options might be for something like that. But that was just recently because of this hysteria of incels and the belief amongst, not even just traditional conservatives, but like the more rabid liberal progressives, wokesy progressives, is that myself and Rich Cooper and Myron Fresh and Pearl are radicalizing incels because they might be the next one to go and drive a truck through, I don't know, the Women's Day parade or something like that. And as I said before, the percentage of men who self-identify as quote unquote incels is less than people who identify as being trans.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it's a fraction of a percentage. But that's the boogeyman. And if there is no boogeyman, no one gets paid, which is why I'm waiting for November 6th, because hopefully all this goes away after that.
Yeah. Another misconception that I see a lot about you is that you are...
Which one? What are we going to get to now?
The anti-marriage one.
Okay.
I mean, that one is especially goofy.
By the way, me and my wife would like to take you out to dinner after this.
Oh, awesome. Great. I'd love to meet Mrs. Tomassi.
Sure.
You've been married for how long?
On July 20th of the coming month, I will be married 28 years.
Okay. So you've been married for almost 28 years. Yet there are people out there who say that you are anti-marriage and you even that you hate marriage. On the face of it, 28 years of marriage seems to fly in the face of that accusation, but I've been called a white supremacist more than once. I would thought I'd have some protection against that charge, but apparently not. We live in a topsy-turvy land. So what are your actual thoughts and beliefs around marriage?
Okay, so for the record, I am not anti-marriage. Okay. I loved doing the interview with James Sexton, divorce attorney guy. He had just done the soft white underbelly interview.
He blew up off that.
And yeah, he did. This was August of last year, and I got him right after because I'm like, dude, come on my show again. You know, so we started talking. But every time I go on with him, I make this same point: is like, I'm not anti-marriage as an institution. I'm against the way we do it now. And so I think that we have corrupted it. I think it has turned into something that's completely like not when I got married. It's right now. It's not the same thing. And so I would, by the way, I would say the same thing about like education, because I know that's something you've been on about a couple of times.
Education.
I think higher education, the value of an education is a reward unto itself. If you're just in an education to get a better job, well, great. But like the real person, an educated individual should be able to speak knowledgeably on a great many different things. That's the reward of education, right? I'm against the way we do it now, which is the higher institutions tend to be more like sort of indoctrination camps. And I'm like, we need to find a way to make education something that's more intrinsically valuable. I think we need to make marriage something that's more intrinsically valuable if you want to, quote unquote, save marriage. As I said, being 28 years, coming on 28 years in, obviously I'm not anti-marriage, but what I get is this sort of paradox between like, Rollo Tomassi, he's married, so he can't be red pill. Right, because no married guy. I'll get black pill doomers and MGTOWs and guys like that. He's a simp. Man. No rational male would be married. Are you kidding me? And then I'll get the other side of it. It's like, well, Rollo can't be married. He's red pill, right? And so because I'm red pill, therefore I must be against marriage, right? Because red pill guys /through marriage, right? Yes. But as we were saying before, do you actually like hate strawberries because you said you liked mangoes? Like it's the same mentality, right? It's this black or white, binary mentality that if you don't like, or if you say something against something, therefore it means you are endorsing that. And as you said, I'm a sophisticated individual, right? I believe you can have conversations about things that you might fervently believe in, but that doesn't mean you can't have a conversation about something that is criticize what you fervently believe in. In fact, I think it's necessary to test the strength of an idea. You have to have it in the crucible of open debate, and sometimes that means criticizing the things that you believe are your most deeply held convictions and your beliefs, right? So because I point out facts like the divorce rate, or I have a conversation about divorce with Jim Sexton, or because I quote marriage rates, or because I quote I will bring up just a simple fact like the average age of first marriage today in the United States is 30 for women and it's 32 for men. And then I take that data point and I sort of connect those dots to other things. The fact that I'm doing that and I'm giving you that data point, I'm not telling you how to feel about it, right? They go, okay, that must mean you hate marriage. Well, you can't. What a hypocrite he is. He's been married for 28 years. He's got a wife. I don't understand. You don't understand because you can't think in like abstract terms, right? And so when I say, when I say that marriage today is an all downside risk for men, I'm factually accurate about that. I'm not saying you should or shouldn't do one or the other things, because I think a lot of people think that because I'm critical of how we do marriage today, I must therefore be anti-marriage. That's not what I'm saying.
It could be coming from the complete opposite end.
I would very much, and here's the main reason, like I try to make this distinction. It's impossible. I've done this for so long. I know I'm not going to win this conversation, right? But I've done this for so long that I anticipate what people are already going to say, right? So when people say, well, how come you criticize something that you're involved in? I go, that's why I do.
Yes.
That's why you should take me even more seriously.
Yes.
I'm in this for 28 years, and I am telling you,
care enough to
this
criticize
is an all downside risk, and I wish it wasn't like that. How can we change that? How can we have quote unquote marriage reform? I would say that. But I think one of the reasons why we have such a problem with the topic of marriage right now is because we're still trying to figure out how to do marriage in the 21st century with a 20th century mentality about monogamy and marriage that used to work in generations past, but now that we're in the 21st century, now we're looking at like polygamy, now we're looking at thruples, now we're looking at polyamory, now we might still be trying to make even monogamous, traditional marriage work in a 21st century egalitarian way of doing things, as I was saying before, based on sort of Marxist principles, right? How do we make it work? And I think the problem is you said you read my fourth book on religion, right?
I've read 4 of your books.
In the introduction for that, I think when people want to know what killed marriage, it's technology that killed marriage. It's not feminism. Feminism was just like part of the fallout of it. Technology is what killed it. The technology is hormonal birth control. It might have been social media. It might have. If you read the book, you understand. I make these metaphors. I probably shouldn't do this, but I made these. You never use metaphors online. You can use them in your book. Don't use them online, because everybody takes them literally. I likened it to the tree of knowledge in the Garden of Eden. Like the apple that Eve eats is actually from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, right? It's the tree of knowledge, right? And I made the comparison to like every so often in human history, another apple falls off that tree. We get a new invention like atomic weapons. That was an apple that falls off the tree. Human flight, like the Wright brothers learned how to fly in the air. Okay, well, that's a game changer, right? Now suddenly we did go to the moon. Okay, so we go to the moon, okay? And that's another apple that falls from the tree. Hormonal birth control is another one that fell from the tree. The impact of the internet and access, easy, quick, instantaneous access to information that we never had access to before is another one. And we have to figure out how to process and how to do these things. It's just that there's too many apples falling off the tree all the time, and we don't know how to incorporate those into a functional society right now. So if you read the introduction to my fourth book, which is called Religion, thank you very much. It took me 3 years to write. I liken the internet to the Gutenberg press. And the Gutenberg press in like the mid 1400s or maybe late 1400s was movable type. And what's the first thing they do? They print the Bible. And now the layperson can read the Bible, and it increased the literacy rates in Western Europe, like skyrocket. Now we can have other books. Now we have the Bible. Now I have this. And you want to know why there was the Protestant Reformation? It's one invention. One apple that fell off the tree. That was a Gutenberg press. Yeah. And so you have wars as a result of that between Catholics and Protestants. So sometimes those apples are not necessarily great things. But what it did was it increased human knowledge exponentially. And that's exactly what the internet has done now. What we're doing right here in this podcast studio is we have the internet, we go through the forum years, we go through social media years, we go through the video or the blog years, and then we go through the video years right now. And so everything sort of exponentially sort of builds up over time. But really what is it building up? It's building up access to information, easy access to information that we never had access to before. And I think that we're living in a time right now in the 21st century where we're still 20th century creatures trying to make 20th century ideals work in the 21st century. So I first started to notice this when it was Donald Trump was running against Hillary Clinton. They're both 20th century brands trying to run 20th century campaigns in the 21st century. And so now when I see political action committees like Progressive Victory, like buying influencers to essentially be sock puppets and mouthpieces for the DNC, that's a technology and a use of a technology that we've never had in the past. And how are we going to deal with that? Are we going to make it illegal? Are we going to find some way to is it going to go against terms of service for Twitch or YouTube or something like that? We're still trying to figure those things out. And it's exactly what we're trying to do with marriage right now, is we have access to divorce rates, like all the way back to like when they started keeping them, our marriage rates. Marriage is at the lowest rate it's ever been, 6.1 per 1,000 people. Mm-hmm. People say, oh, well, isn't it great that the divorce rate's lowered? Or like, yeah, but the marriage rate is at 6.1 per 1,000, right? And so everybody wants to try to sort of have some wiggle room in there and try to say, well, it's not as bad as it seems. Well, that it's not as bad as it seems is the want for that 20th century ideal to be dragged into the 21st century. Mm-hmm. And so we'll try to find ways and caveats and everything else to sort of like do an end around these statistics that are pretty damning. It's my opinion that it would be better for people to just simply read those things, take them for what they are, and then use them in the 21st century in a 21st century way. Mm. So, like, for instance, I'm going to quote Aaron Clary once again. He popularized this concept is that we live in a post-marriage society right now. And I don't necessarily think we live in a post-marriage society, but I do think that we are trying to redefine and trying to figure out how to do marriage in the 21st century.
Yeah, well, they've literally redefined it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly.
On the most basic level. Like, again, people get uncomfortable and squirrely around this. And regardless of someone's political or social position on this, by going from marriage being an institution between a man and a woman to suddenly saying, oh, no, actually.
It could be anybody. Yeah.
A man can marry a man, a woman can marry a woman. Mm-hmm. You have fundamentally changed thousands of years of how this thing has operated.
Do you remember the conversation that was happening? Like, how does that affect you? That these people, love is love,
always.
Right? Love is love is an article of faith, by the way, that of a secular religion. But I remember the conversation at the time was like, well, how does this affect you? You're heterosexual. You can get married.
Don't marry a man.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That was the whole thing. Well, now we know why. Because it fundamentally changed the definition. Mm-hmm. So, for instance, you're going to laugh at this example. Aaron Clary and myself could get married if we wanted to, right? Because we're both men, and we're allowed to. Remember, it's not homosexual marriage; it's same-sex marriage.
Yes.
So the stipulations of my new marriage with Aaron Clary is that we're both heterosexual, and we can go and party with all the chicks we want, bring them home, and have random sex whenever we want. Well, that's the stipulation of our marriage.
The thing that would block it, though, is something that is more rooted in tradition, which is bigamy.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
You might have a problem with that.
So it would be like, nope, bigamy.
Okay, so we're not going to get married in Utah, but we will get married in Nevada. How's that? Okay. But the thing is I think people, it's a funny illustration to point out that it's not homosexual marriage. It's same-sex marriage. So really what it is the marriage as a concept is really up to the two individuals who are in it. So when I'm doing Access Vegas, and I have these girls on who are in open relationships or semi-open relationships. There's different ways to do it. There's like the guy who has it's closed on her end and it's open on his end, right? That's one form. Then it's open on both our ends and we're in an open relationship and let your freak flag fly. And then it's open on her end and closed on your end, even though you don't know it's really close. And then there's what I have with my wife, closed on her and closed on my end. That's traditional, okay? We're trying to figure out how best to
you dinosaur, you. How dare you?
How dare you? You want to know why I'll never go on? Not that I wouldn't if they asked me, but like, here's why I will never be able to go on Daily Wire is because like, they want to get me on like he's anti-marriage. No, dude, I'm married longer than you have. It's because I'm married. Like I fit every single ideal of like the trad cons on that side of the even the most extreme. I fit every single ideal, but I'm also the godfather of the red pill. Yeah. So, but I think really what it comes down to is we're trying to figure out how to do a 20th century marriage ideal in the 21st century. And why are we doing that? Because we have access to so much information and access to so much like social media, for example. You got all these women who are on OnlyFans, or you got these women who are on Instagram, and they're still advertising their sexuality and they're technically advertising their sexual availability. Whether that's true or not, they're not showing pictures of their boyfriends. They're only showing pictures of them, right? In a bikini somewhere on some beach, right? And that's really still advertising. So, like for instance,
what's crazier is out in the wild when you see the boyfriend taking all the photos. When
you're at the beach. He's the one. Yeah, he's the Instagram boyfriend. Yeah, he's the one actually like enabling all of this. But the reason why I say this is because like that's the women advertising their sexuality. If women were doing that like overtly and they were saying, "Oh no, I'm with you," or "We're closed on my end, closed on yours," well, you're advertising your sexuality. We would call that cheating, right? If I went and started picking up on the waitress at the bar and grill or something, and I actively went out and tried to do that, you would say that was cheating. Okay, well, for men have to go out and actually be the pitchman. They have to be the salesman. I got to sell you on my quality and sell you on who I am, because that's how I'm going to convince you to sleep with me, right? Women are the advertisers. All they have to do is show their pictures on OnlyFans or Instagram, or well, let's just say you're not even doing it professionally. It's just on Instagram, right? Why am I not on your Instagram? Why is there no picture of me on your Facebook? Why is there no on your social media? Well, because as soon as a woman posts a picture of her boyfriend or her husband on that social media, she loses market capital. That's why. So that's why we say, when women say, "I would never delete my Instagram for any guy." No, the right guy would never ask me to do that. And I go, well, you are still kind of advertising your availability, even though you claim to be you're exclusive with this guy, right? So are you or are you not? And that's one of the things we're trying to figure out in the 21st century, because women don't want to give that up. They don't want to give up the attention. They don't want to give up the positive strokes that they get from putting sexy pictures online. So how does that fit into 21st century marriage? Also, what about a woman who wants to bring other women into the bedroom for her husband? They're still married. Adam 22, for example.
Oh boy.
Yeah, I'm sure you're familiar with leaning the plug and that whole situation. I know this is a family show, so I'll try not to get into that too much. But I will say this, factually correct. Adam 22 and Lena are married. I've seen the wedding pictures. I know they are married. Are they married? By traditional sense?
Legally, yeah.
Legally, they are married. Yeah. They're the ones who are defining that. So as I was saying before, if Aaron Clary and I wanted to get married and we're both heterosexual, right? That's just how we're defining marriage in the 21st century. He can go have sex with any of the girls he wants to, and I can too. That's just the stipulations of our marriage. The thing is in the 21st century, we're still trying to figure out how to do that with social media, with Instagram, with streaming 4K pornography, with you can get into the marriage thing, all the issues that revolve around intersexual dynamic, the red pill, and marriage. You can include pornography. You can include sedations, which I would include as say drugs and weed and all this other stuff. You can include open marriages. You can include women not wanting to give up their Instagram social after they get married, right? Or even showing a picture of the guy that they're with, right? Because they're reluctant to. That's their sort of fail-safe, right? Okay, well that's affecting marriage in the 21st century. We never had to deal with that when I got married in 1996. Yeah. So yeah, it was different back then, but it's also the definition of marriage and the definition of what you were getting yourself into was much more clear than it is today. The fact that I'm having this conversation with you and I'm pointing out all of these, how we're trying to redefine or trying to figure out, I'm not saying redefine, but we're trying to understand how we can make a 20th century ideal of marriage work in the 21st century. The fact that I'm saying that makes them hate me.
Yes.
Because I'm pointing out, I'm holding up a mirror and they don't want to look in that mirror.
Do you know the thing that's really odd? Is that with so much stuff that you say and you stand for, and
you actually must be against marriage,
and you actually live in your own life, So I'm at this interesting position. Not so long ago, I had a conversation with my friend Lila Rose, who I'm sure you know is traditional,
well aware of her.
Catholic conservative, pro-life activist, and I've talked to all these Daily Wire guys, right? I've had conversations with Ben Shapiro, Michael Knowles, Jeremy Boring.
Sure.
I'm in this weird position where I'm connected to everybody. I don't know if anyone's been on a grerer diversity of podcasts than I have.
You spread it far and wide. I'll give you
both
that.
in terms of interviewing.
I'd say probably even more than Chris Williamson. If you're talking to me, I
genuinely think I can make a claim that I'm up there. Maybe Rogan's got me on that. So it's interesting because I hear both public and private conversations about what people are thinking, and there's so much agreement. This is the crazy thing. So I'll be talking to, a traditional conservative Christian. They could be Catholic. They could be Orthodox. They could be Protestant or even an Orthodox Jew. And their gripes about marriage and the redefinition of it and the new challenges towards it, they recognize all of this stuff. They often will talk about it, sometimes even on their own podcast. But I find the analysis stops at a fairly shallow level.
Yeah.
So with the so-called red pill guys, those scary red pill guys, there's a deeper analysis that goes on. They're not stopping just at this surface level. They're going on deeper and deeper and deeper.
We're asking questions that they don't want to have answered.
They're getting into the weeds where it starts getting uncomfortable and it starts getting to points which, do you know what I think it is actually? I think it's like people are afraid to go too deep because then some people will draw certain conclusions. So there will be some men who hear all of this stuff and they're like, you know what, marriage isn't worth it. I'm not going to get married. And they don't want people to make that, they don't want people to reach that conclusion. So rather than drill down too far, it's like, let's just drill through the surface and hope that people still
pray it away.
Decide to go get married regardless. And if they don't, we're going to call them cowards. We're going to shame them. We're going to tell them to man up. We're going to challenge their masculinity. And I'm just like, guys, we're
going to say they're irresponsible.
Yeah. I'm just like, guys, I'm as pro-marriage as all of you. I'm not married yet. I plan to get married. I will get married. I'm on the pro-marriage team. However, I can see what a crap show it is. And as a guy who is not yet married, you know, you got married almost 30 years ago. But you're very much in tune with everything that has changed in that time.
Oh, yeah.
Most people who got married around the time you did, they are 20 to 30 years removed from all the changes. They're not even aware of what young people are dealing with now. So they're like, what's up with the kids these days kind of thing.
And it's not that complicated.
And you're like, dude,
no, it really is.
Do you know, you know, they're too detached from it.
I mean, just the fact that we had, you know, like the internet and social media and everything, that's just one factor.
It's such a game changer.
Well, like what you were saying before is like, I think they want simplistic answers to complex questions is what they want. They want it to be they want it to be easier. I'll go on record as saying this. I've done this a million times. I think that men and women are better together than we are apart.
Yeah,
we are, and even like you don't even have to be religious to figure this out. It's on an evolutionary, just nuts and bolts pragmatic level. If you do fMRI brain scans of men and women, and you look at the architecture and the synapse connections between men and like how our brains are structured, and you lay those two fMRI studies on top of each other, they almost like form a perfect. You know, they're complementary to each other. The sexes were meant to be complementary with a E, not adversarial. Now, our mating strategies are adversarial, but when we are together, when men and women are together, we are better together than we are apart. We are in innate complements to one another. To hear, like, I don't know how many people have ever heard me say those words, especially not in TradCon circles, because they are just dumbfounded when I say something like that, because they think that one of those red pill guys is never going to, they're all anti-marriage. I'm not anti-marriage. I'm anti the way that we do it now. It's from a practical sense, and I'm going to go all James Sexton on you. It's an unconscionable contract. It's a contract you would not enter into. Were you not to have a gun to your head, or you were intoxicated, or something like that? It is a contract that nobody would enter into in their right mind. That's a legal definition for it, because it's a contract that only rewards the person who actually exits the contract as it works right now.
Do you not think that's overstating it a bit?
Well, again, I don't think so.
Okay.
And I would defer to Jim Sexton about this, because he's got the statistical knowledge of this.
Because I think sometimes people go a little too far on both sides. So
I think tradcons tend to think that like those red pill incel guys, they don't want to get married because they're afraid of losing half their stuff. As you said, we go deeper than that, right? Okay, it's not just losing half your stuff. In fact, most of these guys don't have that much stuff to have a half of in the first place, right? But what they're doing, what the way that I look at it is you can't just look at it in financial terms. Like when I was having the conversation with Jim about prenuptial agreements, right? He says, I think everybody should have a prenup, but like he'll go to a marriage fair, you know, and he's like, I'm here to talk about prenups, right? They won't let him on the floor. They won't give him a booth because that doesn't fit in with the romance, you know, narrative. But but that's a fact. That's something that you have to really consider. You have to think about. I think it's what he told me, that the people will enter into a marriage contract faster than they will to buy a mortgage for their home, or buy a new title for their car, or a mobile phone. Yeah. They're more likely to read the stipulations and the fine print of that than they will understand what they're getting into when it comes to marriage. And that's just the legalities of it. Then there's the personal stuff, because who you marry and who you decide to have children with is going to not only affect your family, your brother, your sister, your mother, your father. You're basically bringing two families together. And when my daughter got married last year in August, thank you, and he came to me and asked me for permission to marry her, which honestly, it was nice. Don't get me wrong, but it's a formality, right? Yeah. And I said, you're asking me, do you know what you're asking me? And he's like, no, I just figured it would be good, proper, good etiquette or something. Like, okay, so here's what you're asking me. You're asking me to blend my family with yours. Yeah. That's what it's really about. Because every decision that you make together with my daughter is going to affect me and my wife and my dogs and your family as well. And guess what? When those kids are adults and I have great-grandchildren, or I have God forbid, you have great-grandchildren, right? That's going to affect it's a ripple effect, right? So it's not just about you and my daughter. It's about everyone in that concentric circle that is in that ripple effect.
People have lost track of that.
People don't think about that. Yeah. They think about, I'm going to lose half my stuff. These guys are afraid of losing half their stuff. No, they're worried about that damn ripple effect is what they're worried about. Because it's not just financial investments, it's emotional investments as well. When I talk to guys who are coming out of divorces at 45, which is the prime demographic for male suicide, it is also men who are the average age of first divorce is 45 years old. And when men go through divorce for the first time, they're 8 times more likely to take their own lives. Yes. Okay. So when I'm dealing with these guys, that's a consequence that I don't hear TradCons or anybody else saying, well, that's half their stuff. But what about the guy who's going to off himself at 45 because he got into a situation that he should have thought about earlier?
A lot of people, and I see this very much from both quote unquote sides, people really don't give a crap about a lot of men's problems.
Oh, no, of course not.
And they really You
know why that is? Because we have a burden of performance, and to make us respectable, we can't complain.
Yeah, I get that, but I just find it remarkable when, no matter the situation, there's a reflex to blame it on the man.
Yeah.
And there's many things that should be blamed on the man or blamed on men in general, right? Men F up a lot. But it's like a reflex. If the woman, it turns out the woman cheated on him, well, what did he do wrong? Why did he make her do that, right? Yeah, if the man cheats, obviously that's his problem.
He's wrong. If she cheats, what did you do wrong to make her cheat?
Yeah, I just find like there's this knee jerk to always take it off the woman and put it back on the man. And I would somehow accept that if we lived in a more traditional society. If we did live in this traditional culture and we were not in this weird fake egalitarian world, and it was like, okay, yeah, we all agree the man is the head of the family, the man is responsible, the man is the leader, come hell or high water, then I'd be like, okay, fair enough. But it's like people play this game where they flip-flop between the egalitarianism and the feminism and the traditionalism and the chivalry.
They want 20th century perks within 21st century, or the 21st century perks with 20th century traditionalism.
Great way to put it.
So here's my biggest gripe with traditional conservatives right now is their solution to all the men's problems, as you were just saying here, is be more responsible. Take on more responsibility. I'll hear Jordan Peterson say this. I'll hear Mark Driscoll say this. I'll see all these people who are like sort of dyed-in-the-wool conservatives say, well, the world would be a better place. Men just need to man up and they need to take more responsibility. The problem is they don't have the authority to exercise that responsibility. So if you're going to, if the men have like 100% responsibility and 0% authority. That is the definition of slavery, is what that is. The opposite, of course, is 100% authority and 0% responsibility. That's tyranny.
Yes.
Okay. As it stands in a gynocentric social order, we expect the panacea, like the solution to all problems, is men just take on more responsibility. But the problem is if you can't give them a commensurate level of authority to exercise what they need to meet those responsibilities, all you're doing is just piling more and more liability and accountability and responsibility on these guys, and they're toothless. They're doing it with their hands tied behind their backs, because the 50-50%, the egalitarian side of things, those perks negate that authority. So when we start talking about like gynocentrism and feminism, or we talk about what would be called androcentrism or patriarchy, right? The buzz term for the late 60s, early 70s, like militant feminism, was smash the patriarchy, right? Patriarchy is a more balanced system than feminism or gynocentrism. And the reason for that is because under a idealized patriarchy, I'm not saying corrupt, but under an ideal patriarchy, a man has responsibilities to be responsible for his children.
Yes.
We saw when we see a single mother and her child goes out and commits a criminal act or commits suicide or has a drug problem or whatever else, we go, where's the father?
Yep.
That's 20th century. There's no father. You said a woman can do exactly. We're all the same. We're all equal. Men and women are just the same. Blank slate. So why would that make any difference? Well, it does, because there's something in our brain, something in our subconscious, something in our genetics, the way we're wired, is to say, where's the man in all of this, right? And the reason why we blame men for a lot of things for being irresponsible is because our innate evolved firmware wants to look for a responsible adult male to come in and take care of this situation. But because the emotionalism has led us all to play the same game and to pander to this idea that it feels better if we say men and women are exactly the same, and a woman can be just as good a father as she can be a mother at the same time and be superwoman about it, then that shouldn't make any difference. But it does to our psyches. It makes a difference. And the reason for that is because patriarchy we expect responsibility from that guy under patriarchy. But patriarchy also says, but you have the authority to do that. And if you're going to be responsible for your family, responsible for your wife, and responsible for your kids, and if they commit a criminal act, you've committed a criminal act. That's the way it used to be, especially under like coverture laws. Like a man was responsible for his wife and his kids, and if his wife killed somebody or his wife,
he would go
to jail because he was responsible for that, because he also had the responsibility to use and exercise the authority that patriarchy granted him to keep her in line and to keep his kids in line. And that doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to be this tyrannical, abusive son of a bitch. It means he's going to use that, exercise that as, what they will call beneficent sexism, benevolent patriarchy, right? And what we have right now is we have 100% responsibility for men and 0% authority to exercise that responsibility. Until traditional conservatives are willing to have that argument or have that conversation or talk about, you want to solve the problem, it begins there. Not just take more responsibility, be a better man.
But people won't, because they've still got the feminist indoctrination.
Yeah, exactly. And again, as I said, everybody born after 1965.
Yeah, even speaking in those terms, you are just opening yourself up to be called, at the lightest, you'll be called insecure and misogynist. At the worst, you'll be called, I don't even know, even talking in those terms, or even saying that patriarchy is a positive thing. And this has even infected churches.
Oh, yeah.
Massively. You wrote a book on this, right? But that idea, it is frustrating. And the thing I find really fascinating with it as well is it's actually making everyone less happy.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm seeing all of these women, 20 to 40, especially, right, whether they're posting TikToks crying in their car, or you're just having private conversations with people and they're speaking very honestly and they're talking about how hard it is to find, a good man and a righteous man and, husband material. Meanwhile, you talk to guys. You have a messed up society when you have all of these men who are saying how hard it is to find a decent woman and to find a wife. And you have all of these women who are saying how hard it is to find a decent man and to find a potential husband. And logically, you would think, okay, this should be quite easy to solve, right? We bring that group together with that group. And, some of it is expectations. I think a lot of it is expectations. I think a lot of it is just unwillingness to be honest with themselves and with others about what people really desire and the type of arrangement that they would
and what they desire at particular times in their lives.
That's true.
So when I was just on Adam Sosnick's show out in Valuetainment out in Fort Lauderdale, And he was going around the panel of girls. It was myself and Mike Sartain, another guy was on there. And he was going around the panel of girls talking about like, do you plan to get married at some point? And he's running, each one of them saying, yeah, maybe I want kids, blah, blah, blah. He gets up to the girl who's 23 years old. She goes, I am not thinking about marriage or kids or anything like that. And I go, see, and he starts like laying into her. Well, aren't you thinking about your fufuture? Maybe now's the time to think about this, and trying to like, wag fingers and scold her a little bit. I go, Adam, stop. I stopped the show right there. I said, don't go any further, because she's a really good example of exactly what's going on. A 23-year-old woman is at the peak of her sexual market value. That's not even an afterthought for her, because that's her time to be as sexually selective as she wants to. She has the world as her oyster. When the men want to fly her out, she's not thinking about that. But when she gets to be 28 years old, she probably will start thinking about that, because now we got to find a guy before the lights at the club come on, and we got to find somebody who's going to be a good, we're going to settle for this guy at 30, the average age of first marriage. But women of that age during that time, they're not looking for the same thing that they're going to be looking for once they get to be a little bit older. And we wonder why. Well, how come you won't do that? Well, the reason why they don't want to sacrifice that peak agency that they have at that time in their life is because first of all, they enjoy it. So we just start with that. But they're not. It's not even an afterthought for them to think that far ahead, because it's not. They've been taught that they need to go and get theirs when they can get it. Because for women, their peak of their agency is going to be like probably around 23, 24 years old. And then when that's why I keep saying men need to understand that their peak agency is probably going to be around 36, 37 years old. Right? Now, I'm not saying those two should get together. I'm just saying that's when those peaks are, when a guy's hitting his stride. That's when that's going to happen. But the difference is that we're different people at different ages, or we have different priorities when it comes to marriage at 23 than we would at 33 years old, because the chips are down, and we better, like I said, grab a guy before the lights come on at the end of the night. But that's again more fallout from the data age, from seeing her girlfriends on Instagram doing those, living vicariously through her girlfriends or her sister or whatever like that, seeing that. Those are things that we didn't think of back in the day. Like the quote that I got from you was, human beings were not, I'm paraphrasing here, we're not designed, didn't evolve to have this global communication that we have today, or something very, very close to that. And that's what's kind of like screwing us up.
Like I said,
I think
we're running the biggest human experiment in history.
And we don't even realize that we're doing it right now. So everything that we just mentioned, when it comes to responsibility, when it comes to marriage, when it comes to all these things, as far as like the 20th century ideals for those things, and putting them into the 21st century, it comes back to the communication thing right there. Is we've never had this kind of access and this kind of global communication. Like in any other era, I would never know you. Because we wouldn't have these cameras, we wouldn't have the internet or anything. I lived in a time before the internet, and I lived in a time after the internet. And once Gen X is gone, maybe once we're gone, that's going to be the last generation that lived prior to that invention that was the internet. And that's why it's weird to me. I think I'm in a unique position here to see how things were before and to see how things are right now.
Yeah, and I'm in the last generation where we're going to be able to see that. I'm 37, and people who are 7 years younger than myself or so, or younger, they don't have much recollection of the world pre-internet, pre-smartphone, pre-social media. So you wouldn't think there's a gigantic gap between, say, a 37-year-old and a 27-year-old, but because of the technology, the way they've grown up and what they've experienced during school, during university, all of that as young adults, it's actually very different to how things were for me. Because when the smartphone, social media revolution all kicked in, I was already in my early 20s. And so you've got that kind of half your life before it and half your life after. What I was going to say is, I think actually we've talked about the internet and the social media and that factor. I think that's I think it's a significant factor, but I think more so when we're looking at just kind of like average normal people, so not the type of girls who are going to be going on some of these podcasts or doing the street interviews and all up in the club, that type, is I think a lot of it is just economic and education driven as well. Sure. Because again, coming back to the egalitarian thing, maybe I'll share one of my radical ideas here. I think it's stupid that society just expects men and women to run on the same timeline.
Yeah.
It's dumb. And it comes back to this egalitarian idea that we're just biologically identical and intellectually identical and all this stuff. And like, this is going to sound radical to some people because they're so fixed in just the way the status quo. But I think a lot of young women should seriously consider getting married and starting a family before pursuing higher education and pursuing employment and so on. Running on the same timeline as men is like, all right, I'm going to spend my 20s getting as much education as I can and then settling into my career and so on. And then I'll get into my 30s and I'll start thinking about marriage and family. Like I've had conversations with girls who are, let me not say girls, women, young women in their early 20s, and their life plan, their strategy is to get to 30 plus, sometimes I've heard them say even like 35, and then they'll start thinking about finding a guy to settle down with, starting a family, and so on. And my typical answer is, can I be just frankly honest with you? Just honest with you. I have no dog in this fight. Can I just be real with you? And that's a terrible idea. I think that's a horrible idea. If you were a 20-year-old man telling me this, I'd be like, yeah, fair enough. You know, I might say that maybe I think it's a little too rigid. You know what? If you're 28 and you find the amazing girl, whatever, like, cool, like, go get married. Why wouldn't you? But I'm like, you are setting yourself up most likely for failure and disappointment if you choose to do that, because our fertility windows are not the same. There is just a biological reality. Forget everything else. There's just a biological reality at play here where you're telling me you want to get married, you want to have children, you want to do all these things, and your plan is to wait until your mid-30s to then start looking for a guy. Are there women out there who have done that and they've managed to have it all? Yes, that does exist. I know some of them. Probability-wise, it's just not a good plan. And I think people are so uncomfortable to say that because people will be, my sister, my sister just got married at 38 and she just got, what about? It's whataboutism is what it is. What about this? What happens if this happens? I get this from like, obviously I deal mostly with guys, but like when I'm dealing with women, and I do have a few of them, they'll come to me and they'll say, well, Rollo, where are all the good guys? Where are the nice guys? You've heard this a million times, right? And I go, well, they're back in your 20s where you left them, basically, is where they are. But these are the women who have followed this life plan of, okay, like counter to what you were just saying, is they follow this life plan of, okay, I have to go to college. I have to get a degree in communications. I have to get a degree in, human resources or psychology, or whatever the soft sciences are, or gender studies. And now I've got this. I've done either 4 or 8 years of college. Great. Now I'm an educated individual. Now I'm making some money, whether I'm working in the private sector or I put together the business or something like that. So I got my money. I got the bag. I got the education. I'm basically what women are doing is they're following the life plan of men in the 20th century because they thought that that's what empowered men. Yes. Well, women weren't allowed in colleges. Okay. Well, now you're allowed. Okay. But here's the thing is that's not what empowered men. Going to college isn't what empowered them. It was the fact that they were men and they were doing things. It was the act of doing stuff, right? It wasn't the fact that they all went to college. They all went to this. Following that plan is not a guarantee of success. But what they've done is and this is not a Rollo Tomassi quote, this is a Gloria Steinem quote, which is they've become the men that they wanted to marry. And so when they get to be 32, 33 years old and they go, Rollo, how come I can't find a quality guy? These guys ain't worth anything, right? And I'll go, well, here's the problem is like you need to, and we've come full circle. Like in the 70s, we told guys, you need to get in touch with your feminine side. You need to express your emotions. You need to feel more, right? That kind of stuff. You need to get in touch with your inner femininity, right? As if there's some sort of Jungian balance between male and female, right? Now we've come full circle. So what I tell them, I say, you need to get in touch with your inner femininity because you're a man. You're basically have become the men that you wanted to marry. And heterosexual guys don't want to marry another dude, right? And so what you've done is you've thought that the path to empowerment was a masculine path of empowerment. So when women tell me, I'm an alpha female, I'm like, no, there's no such thing as an alpha female. There's alpha males. You are an alpha male with female body parts. Whatever. It's a family show. But that's basically you followed a masculine life plan and you're an alpha male. You're not an alpha female. An alpha female looks like a supermodel. She looks like the hottest girl that you could find on Instagram because that's in a female context instead of a male context. Male context is hierarchy, right? As I was saying, are you at the top of the hierarchy? Yes, I walk like the boss and I talk like the boss,
I'm like, okay, well, you're the boss. You are a man. You're not a, well, how do I fix that, Rollo?
And they like to run with the idea that men are intimidated by it.
Yeah, okay, well,
it's not intimidation.
Everywhere along the way where women don't understand something about like the decisions that they make, there's a social convention that excuses that. So it's like, oh, men are infantile. Oh, men just want to get with the young chippies. They don't want to get with a real woman who knows who knows what she wants, and they're just intimidated by it or whatever it is. They're threatened. They're threatened by a strong woman, right?
Yeah.
It's like, no, they're not. They just don't want to get with you because you look and talk and act and behave, and your life plan has been a masculine life plan, and guys generally don't want the opposites attract, likes don't attract, right?
There's also the idea that like you've been saying all this time that you don't need them.
Oh yeah,
so,
yeah.
like,
You don't need a man. I want him.
At some point, the men are like, okay.
Okay, well, you don't need me. Then I'll go get the chick that does need me. How's that? Like, and usually that's the 22-year-old, and I'm 37, right? So when women ask me this, I'll say, "What do I do?" I go, "You need to get in touch with your femininity. You need to feminize yourself more because that's when men want to get with women, right?" What are you saying? I need to dumb myself down? So femininity becomes equated with being dumb, right? Well, those dumb 23-year-olds that I used to be, all the guys that I want to get with them, and you mean I have to act dumb like
she was
those
dating
girls?
Guys in her 30s when she was 23.
Exactly. And so, but they equate being dumb or playing dumb, I should say, with femininity, and that, by the way, that's by design. Okay, so when I forget who, it was Allie. There's this girl, Allie, who did this one video about how she defers to her husband, and how, this is a long time, it was back in 2022. She did a TikTok video, it went viral, and she was saying something about how her employer is her husband, right? And because she's a stay-at-home mom, right? I
can already imagine the comments.
Yeah, and so she's talking about this, and she's like, yeah, I defer to his authority, blah, blah, blah. And women lost their minds.
Oh my gosh,
and the reason why they lost their minds is because of what I call the existential fear for women, right? Which is, if I don't get the bag, if I don't have some sort of fail-safe, if I don't have some sort of insurance policy, that guy might run off with his secretary, or he might dump me and get a trophy bride, and then I'm just going to be destitute and homeless, right, if I don't do that. So there's this fear that is, and by the way, this has been going on really since the early mid-70s, right? Men are inherently untrustworthy. And the reason why is because we have popularized the concept of men being three archetypes. One is Homer Simpson, the dumb, doofy dad, like, Dr. Huxtable, right? Or Everybody Loves Raymond, or, think of the modern father,
sitcom dad,
ridiculous, dumb dad who needs mom to save him from himself because she's female and she has this magical ability, intelligence to know how to save him from himself. Then there is the borderline abuser, the Tinder swindler, right? The manipulative SOB, the guy who is who's if he's not abusing you and you're not going to a battered women's shelter, you're pretty close to it, right? But you can't get away from him because he's so sexy and he just sexes me up the way I like. I mean, he's the dark triad guy. Exactly. You can't get away from him because he's so sexy, but he's abusive or he's manipulative or he's a narcissist, which every man is right now. And then there's the guy, this is a more modern one, which really I attribute this to the millennials, which he's the incompetent guy. He's the guy who doesn't know how to change a tire. He's the guy who has to call the plumber. He's the guy who doesn't know how to tie a necktie. He's the guy who just simply doesn't know the basics kind of thing. So if those are the three archetypes that a woman has to choose from, what woman's going to choose from those things? They don't want that guy. They don't. So what do? They build a life plan around not needing a guy, certainly not any of those three archetypes. So how do I do that? I go to school. I get my own money. I become educated. And then when I'm 33, I'm wondering where are the guys who I did everything in my life to make me a high quality man as a woman. And I can't understand why men don't want to get with me right now. Well, because the things that make a man attractive, maximally attractive, like the things that a man has to do to make himself a high value guy, and I hate that term, but to make himself a
attractive
proposition, that you basically followed that life plan. But that's for a man.
Yeah.
That's not for a woman. And so then you get social conventions like that are popularized, like I don't need a man, but I want a man.
Yeah.
Okay, well, you've managed to cover protection, provisioning, and parental investment, and your money, and you don't need. You have an insurance policy. You don't have to worry about marrying a guy who's going to run off with his secretary. Okay, what's the man you want? Jason Momoa. Now let's go watch Aquaman. Seriously, because that's all that's left is the hot, sexy guy. Because that's all women need them for once they've already taken care of all the things that they would have normally in the 20th century have needed them for when it comes to provisioning, protection, parental investment, money, all the value added prospects.
What I think is really difficult now is that there are many millions of young men and young women who are more, let's say, sane. They have a more traditionalist mindset and they want to actually do things more the 20th century way. And now, due to economic factors, due to that existential fear that you just talked about, there's the fear on the men's side and then there's the fear on the women's side. Like it's hard. I'm not going to blame or knock any woman for wanting to not have to totally rely on a man or wanting to pursue an education.
By the way, I think women should have the right to vote. I think women should be able to go to college. I believe that women should be able to do whatever the hell it is that they want to do. But I also believe that they should be held accountable and responsible for the decisions that they make and the consequences of their actions, just like a man. If you're going to follow a masculine life plan, I would expect that from any man. And you want to have this you believe in egalitarian equalism.
You kind of have to pick one.
Guess what? I have to suffer the consequences of my actions, with good or bad. You have to do the same.
Yeah.
So if you want the right to vote, and if you want to be able to go to college, you own your own business and do all this great stuff, which I believe you should be able to do, all I expect you to do is bear the consequences like any guy would have to do themselves.
The point I was going to make is I think that what's hard is there are women who even outright recognize, like, they think feminism was a scam. They're like, but now the way the economy is and the wages and the job market and all these things, they're like, their choices have actually been decreased.
Yeah.
So in the expansion of choice over these last, let's say, 60 or 70 years, what's happened is for the women who are like, hey, actually, I kind of want to be a wife and a mother and I don't want to pursue all of this other stuff. It's now way more difficult for them to do it, just like it's more difficult for a man who wants to do that. You've got guys out there, particularly more religious guys who are, they're under 25. They want to be married by 25.
I think most young men, religious or otherwise, when they're in their 20 to 25-year-old demographic right there, if they found a girl who was hot enough and wanted to get married, they would jump at the chance. They wouldn't care how young or that they were, because they see a woman at the peak of her femininity and her powerfulness. I mean, you want to know why incels get really frustrated with women, especially the ones on our show or whatever. It's because they're powerful. Look at them. They have they're there's chicks that they want to rub one out to and on a porn site or something like that, because it's really an appearance and a position of power is what it is. But if you got a guy who's 20, 25 years old and he's got a girlfriend who's about the same age as he is and she's into getting married, they will probably jump at the chance to get married because they don't know any better at that point.
I'll be honest, and I think they should. I think there's actually, I actually think that people who find their a great potential spouse when they're really young are actually super blessed and fortunate. Because they just avoid all of this garbage.
I would add one caveat to that: if they make it work,
when they make it work, and they statistically, if they're religious, there's
statistically
a high probability.
the younger the marriage, the more likely it is to fail.
Is that true of religious couples?
It depends on the religion.
Okay.
Do you know which religion actually has the best track record for marriage? It's not Christianity. It's not Christianity.
No, let me guess. Hindu.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because there's more.
Hindu.
Yeah. It's a law of averages, basically. But yeah, if you are Hindu, you're probably more
in
likely
India, the divorce rate's under 2%.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I love throwing that one out to religious. What do you mean? You go to church and you pray for 7 minutes a day. I was thinking it was Tim Gordon said you pray for 7 minutes a day. I'm I don't think that the Hindus are actually doing that.
Yeah. So Rollo, man, what's next for you, man?
What is next for me? I'm going to be in Vegas for a while. Still doing Access Vegas with Mike Sartain. I'm still doing my show, which is The Rational Male. I do that on Sundays at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern. I've been doing that for a very long time now, since 2018, I think. I do have one new thing that I'm working on. I mentioned it briefly during our conversation. Is I'm working with Mike Sartain's group called Men of Action, which is it's not like a pickup thing or anything like that. It's sort of a male self-improvement group, I guess. It's not like the War Room. It's not like anything like that. It's a bottom-up rather than top-down organization, and it's like whatever your particular sticking points are as a guy, that's what we focus on. And so it's a one-on-one kind of thing. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because the guys, the demographic that I am focusing on right now who are part of this group are the 45 to 65-year-old demographic, okay? And as I said, 45 years old is usually the average age of first divorce for men. And as I said, 45 to 65 is the prime demographic for male suicide in the United States. And then when men get into divorces, they are 8 times more likely to, self-delete as a result of that. So that was sort of my impetus for wanting to cater to guys. It's really an underserved demographic, quite honestly, because I think when we focus on like sort of male self-improvement, it's usually younger guys who they want to go to a yacht party or they want to go to Vegas and they want to go, they want to be, they need to put themselves into an immersion state, right? Where they have, it's like sink or swim, right? Which is great. But the younger guys want to be able to go to like Zouk or the Omnia, or they want to go to the clubs. They want to go Sapphire. They want to go to Wet Republic or something like that here, and not just Vegas. I mean, it's all over the place. But if you're 45 to 65 years old, I look at it as the sexual market reintegration program.
Oh, interesting.
Have you ever seen there's a series, I want to say it's on Prime, but it's called Tulsa King, and it has Sylvester Stallone in it.
I've seen the poster.
I won't give you a spoiler. I'll give you a spoiler, but I won't ruin it for you. It's based around this guy who's a mobster who is Sylvester Stallone, and he goes away to jail for 25 years, like literally. So when he comes out, he's like 75, 76 years old, which is exactly how old Sylvester Stallone is, right? And in the time from the 25 years he goes in to the 25 years he comes out, lots of things have changed in society. There's YouTube. There's all these technology that we were just talking about. Like he goes to a weed dispenser and he like tries to strong arm the weeds. He's like, no, dude, it's legal. Like he didn't know that it was legal. Yeah. It's legalized since he'd been in the can, right? And so what happens is that the humor of the whole show is this guy who's 75, 76 years old reintegrating himself back into society, like kind of like when you're a prisoner, they have special programs for you to, like if you're a con, you can get a work program and those kinds of things to reintegrate you back into society. Well, that's kind of how I look at this program for guys who are coming out of divorces or coming out of marriages, or maybe they never really got married and they're just trying to figure things out for themselves. And so what I do, what my partners Joe Marin and Jim Kilgore and some of these other guys that I work with, they're older individuals such as myself. I'm 56, Jim's like 57, Joe's like 57 as well. So we're in the demographic where we're specifically catering to those guys to sort of help reintegrate them back in the sexual market. I did something very similar with Robert Kiyosaki. Mm-hmm. So Robert is a very close personal friend of mine right now. I helped him through his divorce with Kim Kiyosaki during that time. And fortunately for him, he had really good friends like George Gammon and Ken McElroy and Jason Hartman, who were big fans of my book and turned him onto it right at the right time. And so for what I did with Robert, I'm kind of applying a lot of those same principles to the group that I'm working with right now. And long story short, the reason I'm doing this is because I think too many people think that the people in the red pill are long on rhetoric and short on action. This is action. This is what I want to do, right? I want to help these guys. I want to be, like boots on the ground, help guys with style, help guys with fitness, help guys with money, muscles, and game, although we call it health, wealth, and relationships. Yes. And the relationships part is not only just women, it's also dealing with their guys too. Because a lot of these guys, particularly in this day and age, I think maybe it's a fallout of social media, but like a lot of the guys that I know don't know how to interact with other men. Like they don't know when they're getting bullied or hazed or what. Just really like I can just hey, what's up, man? They think that's an attack.
Oh, I see.
But just being able to sort of like help these guys reintegrate themselves, not just to the sexual marketplace, but just to be able to develop the social skills that have been either like stunted for them or they never really developed in the first place. So that's kind of what I'm doing right now, and I'm feeling pretty good about it. It's one of the best things I've done in a long time because I'm actually doing something, and I'm not just sitting around doing reaction videos for people to talk about me, right? Because I tended to agree with a lot of these guys saying, well, the red pill is this, and they have a lot of these. They talk about all this data and stuff like that, but they don't really do anything. Like, okay, well, I'm doing something now. Now what?
Yeah.
So that's what I'm working on, Molly. And I'm going to celebrate 28 years of marriage on July 20th.
Fantastic, man.
With my wife, who you'll meet tonight.
Awesome, man. Dude, Rollo, keep up the good work, man.